I want to show you another block that we haven't really talked about yet for a reason, because it's a bit more of an advanced block. If you go to your system category, there is one at the bottom under the Lua header called Lua code. Here's a block where you can literally just type in Lua code. Well, why would you want to do that? If you knew how to type Lua code, you probably wouldn't be in this class. You'd be taking Jeff's class right now. This seems a little strange. The way you do this is you click on this little command prompt, and here you've got lines where you can enter code. Well, there are instances where we've already seen that we have hit the ceiling of block controller and we couldn't do a particular thing we needed to do. If you come across those instances, maybe you can learn just enough Lua to do those little things that you need to do outside of the scope of block controller and accomplish them within block controller. You can do that with Lua code. There are some really simple examples of this. Like there is a control aspect of the controls called .ramp time. .ramp time lets you change the amount of time it takes to alter from one value to another. So when we were moving our fader on the lighting fader and we use our preset buttons and it just snapped from one setting to the other, we might want that to move a little smoother. And you could change the .ramp time of the fader to make that visually a little bit more appealing. Very useful for fading audio in and out as well. If you're trying to mute something, it's nicer for the audio to cascade down rather than to just suddenly turn off. Well, we don't have a ramp time block in block controller. That's not one of the control tree aspects you can get when you're looking at any of your controls. You got value, you got position, you got string, you got color, you got is disabled, you got is invisible, you got all these things, but you don't have .ramp time, even though that's one of the Lua aspects. So maybe you grab a Lua block and you just write the ramp time code into that Lua block and you insert it into your code. That's an example of what you might use it for. I'm also going to show you how, just to give you a little setup here for Jeff's class, how you could use Lua to make some of the things that we've done inside of our blocks more efficient. We have created our interlocking functionality right here. We've got this radio button, interlock buttons, where we had to say, hey, first we're going to turn all the buttons off. And then we're going to check to see if our argument is 1, and if it is, we're going to turn button 1 on. And if we're going to check to see if the argument is 2, and if it is, we're going to turn button 2 on. We talked about how the block controller does kind of limit you to creating those if-then, 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 if-then. Yes, later on, I showed you that infinitely scalable interlocking button system, so you can do it with loops. But it took a lot of blocks and it took a lot of understanding of blocks to get there. And once you're at that point of level of understanding of the blocks, you might be into the Lua world anyways. So if you wanted to write something like this a little bit more scalable, you could use Lua to do it. You can follow along with me on this. I'm not going to get super deep into it, but here's an example of what we could do. I'm going to disable all of this. Disable the entire function of our interlocking buttons. And I'm going to drop in this Lua code instead. And we're going to write a very short script into this Lua block. Here's what it's going to look like. I'm going to say for I, CTL in I pairs of the bank of controls called preset button. We're going to set the controls boolean to a thing. So I'm going to pause right there before I explain what it's doing. This is a for loop. We talked about that for loop right now, but this is a special kind of for loop. Witchcraft! Yes, it is a witchcraft for loop, for sure. Where it's going to look at an array. In this case, it's the array of the bank of our controls. And in indexed pairs, meaning it's going to look at both of the items in the array, both the index and the thing that is inside the mailbox, it's going to do a thing. So we're passing in these two different arguments into the function itself that is happening as the loop executes. We're setting that controls boolean, so the button itself, we're changing its truthiness or its falsiness to something. And the thing we're going to set it to will be within these parentheses. These parentheses need to resolve to either true or false. We're going to say that if the index, if the mailbox number is equivalent to the argument, in this case, the number to turn on that we got from our argument coming in, then we turn the button on. So it looks in index 1 and it says, hey, is 1 equal to the number you gave me? It's not, then I'm turning this button false. It looks at number 2. Its index is 2. Is 2 equal to the number that you gave me? If it is, it turns it on. So we don't need to turn them all off to start off with. We don't need to do an if-else statement for every one of them, because these lines of code, I'm writing the word end, those 3 tiny lines of code will do that infinitely for all of them right there.
If Nate were to run this code, it actually wouldn't work at the moment.
Oh, what did I do wrong?
Not because he did anything wrong, but because he named his argument with spaces. The argument needs to not have spaces in it. So you can go back and you can put underscores, or you could just run it all together.
I believe you. I'm fixing it as Jeff has told me to fix it. Let's double check that it works. Go to our lighting control. And look, our buttons do interlock. Now that is how you could use a for loop to write infinitely scalable interlocking buttons with 3 lines of code. When you do it in the Lua class and we fully explain all of these processes, then hopefully it'll make more sense to you. Right now, you might be staring at that and going, oh, I don't want that. That's beyond me. If you're freaking out about it, then block controller is probably where you live and where you're comfortable. If you are looking at that and saying, yeah, I'm kind of following that language, I can understand what it's doing, congratulations, you're in Jeff's hands.
I'll be seeing you real soon.